It's your Thursday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day and another really good show. A lot of variety on today's show as I sketched it out last night and this morning, kind of more fully, realizing that there's just a lot to get to this time of year. Jerry Zgoda from the Star Tribune will join me here in a little while to talk Minnesota United soccer. It has been a busy last few weeks for the Loons. They fired head coach Adrian Heath, the only coach they've had in Major League Soccer. They won a big match against LA Galaxy right after firing Adrian Heath, which put them still on the fringes of the MLS playoff picture, and now they've gotten a little bit of help along the way to the point that when decision night, I guess more aptly, this year arrives on Saturday, their mission is pretty clear. Win in Kansas City and have any of three other teams either lose or draw, and they will be in at least the wild card 8-9 game in the Western Conference. So all hope not lost here. That said, the Loons have had a terrible time trying to win in Kansas City in their entire history, so that is easier said than done. And Kansas City is in the exact same predicament as the Loons, needing a win to at least have a chance to get into the playoffs. So Jerry and I will explore that a little more fully, in addition to talking through the Adrian Heath firing and kind of spinning forward to what might they be looking for in a permanent head coach after this season does come to a close. Got to get to some other stuff at the end. Big sneaky injury for the Vikings. Marcus Davenport heading to injured reserve. He'll be out at least 4 weeks. Justin Jefferson's a big one, but Marcus Davenport could impact them just as much on defense because of the impact he's had so far, helping Daniil Hunter take some of the pressure off him. So we'll get to that at the end of the show. We'll get to an interesting New York Times piece about the future of sports on TV. A lot of it ground we've covered here before, but a good kind of update on where teams are at, what they're thinking as Diamond Sports bankruptcy heads further into the depths of fall and winter, and teams start to make other arrangements. Interesting game for the Wild tonight, start of a 3-game homestand. We'll talk about that here in a bit. First, though, what did we miss? Well, kind of bothered still a little bit by the way the Twins season ended. I know it's been a week. It was last Wednesday that they went down to Houston 3-2 in a hail of strikeouts. I believe it was 2 consecutive games to end that series where they had 3 hits and 14 strikeouts in each of those games, scored a combined 3 runs in those games, did not get anything really going in either of those games, and there you had it. The season was over. A promising beginning to the postseason came to a quick stop. Still successful in a lot of ways, winning the division, finally winning a playoff game, finally winning a playoff series, not taking anything away from that. But let's spend just a few minutes at the beginning of the show talking about approach, because at the end of year media availability, the Twins essentially remained either steadfast or defiant in their approach, which this year has been basically strikeouts are okay, and they set a major league record for strikeouts in a season as long as they're hitting balls hard and hitting balls over the fence and getting on base with walks. Rocco Baldelli, in his end-of-year availability last Friday, said, you want base runners, you want balls hit on the barrel hard. That is the goal. That's what we want. Those 2 things above all else. However, happened to watch some of the Houston and Texas game on Wednesday, ALCS. Houston, of course, the team that eliminated the Twins. Texas, the team that had not lost in the postseason until that point. Couldn't help but notice that those 2 teams combined for 13 runs and only struck out 5 times each. They both hit the ball hard, both hit the ball over the fence. Both of them maybe having a different or slightly different approach than the Twins did in the postseason. Here's some numbers to back it up. Twins strikeout percentage in the playoffs, 33.6%, far and away the most in the major leagues in the postseason of all the 12 postseason teams. Now, yes, their walk rate, 12.4%, was definitely the best as well, but not nearly the gap that they had in the strikeout rate. The strikeout rate, nobody else has struck out more than 26.8% of the time. So the Twins are striking out basically a little more than 1 out of every 3 trips to the plate. Every other team striking out roughly 1 in every 4 or less than 1 in every 4. Texas and Houston way down near the bottom of strikeout rate, which is a good thing in this case. This is, they're the 3rd and 4th best teams in terms of putting the ball in play. 23.3% in the playoffs for Texas, 22.6% for Houston in the playoffs. 2 teams that, oh, by the way, have also hit 11 and 14 home runs, respectively. The Twins hit 7 in the playoffs. Texas has scored 44 runs in the playoffs. They're doing just fine, putting the ball in play, hitting home runs, while also not striking out at an unreasonable rate. So what does this all mean? Does this mean the Twins need to completely scrap their approach, stop trying to hit the ball hard? No, I don't think so, because they did lead the majors in postseason hard hit ball percentage. All of these stats coming from Fangraphs, by the way. So I don't think they need to completely change what they're doing. I think they do need to amend some of what they're doing, though, particularly with 2 strikes, and the Twins did kind of hint at that is basically something they will consider. Rocco Baldelli saying there are certain points in every game where you want to find a way to put the ball in play, but the vast majority of at-bats, that's not part of the conversation. I'd rather have a guy have a great at-bat, go deep into count and possibly strike out, but give us a chance to actually give us a base runner or actually look for a ball in the middle of the zone and pulverize it. That's what I would prefer. But they did say, they're trying to find a little bit of a middle ground, so they're going to have conversations with certain players about improving 2-strike approach. And that to me would be a step in the right direction. It might not overhaul everything we've seen, but having a better 2-strike approach, and this is kind of simple. This goes back to fundamental baseball. This is not fancy analytics. This is you try to hit the ball hard until you get to 2 strikes, and then you can't be as choosy. You have to be able to foul off pitches at the very least to keep the at-bat alive instead of, trying to find a pitch in a perfect zone. You can't just take these called strikes right on the edge. And again, the season ended with Max Kepler taking a very close pitch on a called strike 3 with a 1-run deficit when 1 base runner, one hard hit ball could have made a difference. So I do think they need to overhaul the approach to a certain degree to have a better 2-strike approach. Now, I think the thing we have to wonder is how much of this is approach versus how much of it is age of some of their players, and how much of it, frankly, is talent up and down the batting order. Do they need a different approach, or do they need some different hitters? I think it's maybe a little bit of both. I think as guys like Matt Wallner, Royce Lewis, even Julian to a degree, although Julian's got a pretty good idea at the plate already. Younger hitters in their lineup, as they mature, they'll probably have a better 2-strike approach, and maybe, just maybe, they need some better talent, not just a different approach in the order. So that's an interesting thing to watch going forward, but it's also interesting to watch right now in the playoffs when you got these more seasoned veteran teams able to not only hit the ball over the fence, but also not strike out at an ungodly rate. Who knew that was possible? Speaking of all or nothing, the Wild gave up 0 goals in their first game, 7 goals in their second game, 2 goals in their third game. 2 wins out of that bunch. That averages out to 3 goals a game allowed, but that's averages can be misleading because you're not getting them by a smooth curve. It's way up and way down. And this game they have on Thursday night at XL Energy Center, first of 3 straight home games against the LA Kings in this case, will be an opportunity for them to show they can keep that number down against a good offense. Kings have been rolling so far this year. I think they've scored 5 goals at least in each of their last couple games. They have a pretty potent lineup. Kevin Fiala, old friend, part of that. So this is a chance for the Wild to show that they can hold a good team down offensively. And I think this is going to be kind of the story of the year. I think their defense and their defensive systems can hold up even without Jared Spurgeon, even without some of their more seasoned veterans, as long as they get decent goaltending, but also, against these lesser teams that can hold up because they just don't have as much firepower? Can they hold down some of the league's better offenses, which is not just a regular season question, but of course will become a postseason question if it works well enough in the regular season. So that's what I'm watching for tonight. Can the Wild not just, compete, but can they hold down? Can they hold a Kings team to 2 or 3 goals, give themselves a chance to win against a good offense? Because I don't think they had a chance to do that yet. Toronto scored 7 on them. The defense was thoroughly exposed in that game. And if they have another struggle against the Kings, you're going to wonder, okay, is this going to be a pattern? Are they going to do this game in and game out against the best teams and the best offenses in the league, or is there more hope for them as the season goes on? So that's what I'm watching for tonight against the Kings.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's talk Minnesota United soccer today with Jerry Zgoda from the Star Tribune. Jerry, it's been an interesting last couple weeks, to be sure. Loons fired head coach Adrian Heath with 2 matches to go in the season. Then not too long after that, they win their next match and score 5 goals. And since then, a lot of the other results have kind of helped them stay in this playoff race to the point now that they go into decision day on Saturday with pretty clear expectations, pretty clear path for what they need to do. They, at the very least, they need to win at Kansas City on Saturday. Anything less than that for them, and they're out. But if they win and any of the teams above them either loses or draws, those 3 teams that are stuck on 43 points, if they either lose or draw any of those teams, the Loons are at least into that wild card game. So quite a last couple weeks.
Yeah, it's maybe not really surprising except for the timing. With 2 games to go. I guess after that loss in LA 5-1, it was hard to keep going. I'm sure that's not the whole reason for it, but that sure didn't help. But yeah, it's been interesting. Then they go out and score 5 goals, and Pookie scores 4 of them, and the whole world changes in a matter of hours, it seems like.
What did you, you're right. The timing of it was maybe the most surprising part, but this had been building for a while, especially with that kind of winless, that 7-match winless streak towards the end of the year that took them, from fairly comfortable, at least in the playoffs position, to the fringes. What have players said since then? What is the kind of the general sense of, life now without Adrian Heath?
Well, and don't forget, this was the second year in a row they did that. Last year they stumbled down the route. The only difference was they won on decision day at home against Vancouver and got in, but it was the same thing at the end of the year where I don't know if it was 6 or 7 games or 5 games, but it was a swoon towards the end. And I think those things, accumulated and they just, I guess they just figured it was better just to cut losses here and see if they they didn't talk about the playoffs right away as a reason for it, but they're staring right now with a chance. They got to win at Kansas City, which is a place they've never won except for that one playoff game,
right?
2020. So that's the first thing, and then they have to, like you said, they have to hope for a little help.
If they do win at Kansas City and manage to get in, does Adrian get to claim this as 5 straight years he's made the playoffs?
I don't know. He's going to have a fight, I guess, with his buddy Sean.
Why has Kansas City been such a hard place for them to play over the years? I mean, I know Kansas City's had some good teams, but the Loons have had playoff teams. What's so hard about winning there?
Well, I think the one time they won was when they had the better team. Kansas City had a really injury filled year, and they went down there, and that's when they had basically all those guys. Reynoso was his first season. He played his way to an assist record, and I think that's easy to explain. And I think the other ones are more that Kansas City was just better. It seems like year after them in Seattle, although not maybe so much recently, but it seems like those are the teams that are every year that you can count on to be good.
Can they bring back Kevin Molino for these playoffs?
Well, I don't know about that, but I was thinking about people asking me about, who's the next coach. I said, what about Buzz Lagos?
Wow. Oh man. Buzz Lagos. I don't think Buzz is the answer, but let's use that as a springboard to some of the bigger picture stuff for this team. I mean, what do you think? Obviously, they're in the midst of trying to get into the playoffs right now, and they could be, playing some meaningful games here for the foreseeable future. But at a certain point, the vision is going to turn quickly to 2024. We've seen different names bandied about. What do you think they're looking for? What do you think their timetable is for hiring a new permanent head coach?
Well, so it'll be interesting to see what they, do they hire a separate GM with GM powers and then the coach rather than, Adrian was basically the decision maker. He had the last say on everything. So we'll see that, and then we'll see if they decide, they want to build around this group of players they have, which is a lot of Spanish speaking players. I don't know if they would go and hire a Spanish speaking coach or not in terms of what the roster is now, or just figure there's going to be the natural turnover with a new GM and you have no idea what the roster is going to look like. So just, wait until that. So, it's people ask me who it's going to be. And I said, well, look at all the guys who have been fired or out of work and you start there. But, I'm sure it's going to be a wide range of candidates. And,
what? Go ahead.
And I'm guessing they want to, do it as quickly as possible, but in a lot of cases you have to wait. If it's an assistant somewhere else, you have to wait for the playoffs to be over. So I don't know how fast the wheels will turn or not.
Do you think, style wise, I feel like coaching searches tend to work in opposites. We see that with the Vikings a lot where, they hire one kind of coach that's kind of more of a, disciplinarian taskmaster, then they go the other direction for a player's coach. What, in the end of the day, how would you describe Heath's style? And do you feel like they want something different, whether it's tactically or personality wise from what he brought to the table?
That's a good question. I think, I mentioned like the Spanish speaking players. The other question is how much do they go to keep Reynoso happy?
Yeah.
How big a factor is that? And it'll be interesting when we get to talk to him. I don't know what he'll say on Friday, but Heath and Mark Watson were the guys who really put in the work to get him here. And it'll be interesting where his kind of headspace is now that they're no longer here. Watson had been to Argentina a number of times to get him signed, and Heath was really instrumental in it. So that'll be really interesting to see.
Aside from just results, I mean, how do we frame kind of what Heath's undoing was? Is it just kind of this pattern of, inconsistency? Is it new direction? Is it just, he's been here for 7 years and it's kind of run its course? What do you think was kind of the tenor of why now and what, why make this decision?
Oh, I think it was just, I just think it kind of accumulated and after a while you just, nobody does it consciously, but players tune coaches out and coaches maybe tune players out, and 7 years is a long time, especially in MLS. And I think it was more a case of that just after a while. And there were other factors, no Reynoso for the first half of the season. Had some stretches where, they had guys gone for international play, and that doesn't always help. But, I think it was more just a case of, he'd been here a long time and I think it was just sort of the accumulative effect. You kind of were going down the stretch of the season saying, this is going to be iffy by the end of the year, what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, 2 days or 2 games before, basically it's a 2-game season now. And, that was, like we said before, that was the only really surprising thing that they did it when they did.
Do you think they'll have to spend more at a certain point? Because their payroll has been kind of in the lower part of the league for the last few years here to either attract a new coach / GM. And, and honestly, like, did Heath get enough to work with here at a certain point to build the kind of roster he wanted to build?
Yeah, they were limited. I mean, they didn't go out and get your $10 million players. Reynoso may end up being that's maybe somewhere sometime, but they certainly weren't spending, with obviously the Miamis and all the top teams, but
nobody's spending with Miami.
But everything's getting more expensive. Players are getting more expensive, and I think they'll probably find out here coaches are getting more expensive. The league's having a little bit of inflation, I think.
Well, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more before we go about just Saturday's opportunity. They scored 5 goals against LA the other day. They've been a generally pretty good road team this season. Part of the reason they're in this predicament is they have not been a great home team. If they're going to win on Saturday, what do you imagine is going to carry the day?
Well, we're going to have to I think they're going to have to get a goal or two, Reynoso to Pukki. I think they're going to have to mind that they're learning kind of chemistry with each other, the runs and all that. And I think you're going to need at least 1 or 2 goals like that. And, what's going to be really interesting is just what the pace of the play is going to be with both these teams knowing they can't draw.
Right.
What's going to happen if it's tied in the second half and who pushes forward and how many, and, just that's going to be the fascinating thing to watch, and just, how wide open this game's going to be or not. You never know how these things play out, but that's the interesting factor that, both are playing for the exact same thing.
That is interesting. You very rarely see a match where a draw benefits neither side. Sometimes you get it where one team benefits from a draw, one benefits from a win. But yeah, both of these teams knowing they have to win should be, I don't know if that makes it might make it more wide open, or it might make it a cautious first half and a wide open second half. It'll be interesting to see how the Loons play it. Did they, tactically in their first game without Heath, did they do much differently, or was it kind of just a little bit of the same, but just different results?
They did a little bit in the midfield. They stretched it out. They pushed Jan Gregus higher and dropped Will Trapp back. And they just made small little adjustments that I think had a little bit of effect. So it'll be interesting to see. I got the impression from talking to Sean McCauley yesterday that they've gone through all those games in Kansas City and looked at areas of the field where that hurt them and didn't, and that they've got some ideas of how this could be different this time around. But last time around it was when Reynoso was playing great, and they had a probably maybe a little bit of roster, but we'll see this time.
Does Sean view this as any kind of audition, or how is he kind of thinking about his future?
He skated around that. I would be surprised, just because all these guys you consider, sort of Heath guys. So I would think they would go fresh and start anew somewhere else. But, we'll see. Maybe if they already have a list, if there's someone out there that they don't have to wait for, or if there's, how long the search is going to take and how many people they're going to talk to.
Well, a lot of intrigue. Big game Saturday in Kansas City. If they win, good chance they'll be in. If they lose or draw, the Loons are definitely done, and then turn their full attention to coaching search, roster building, things like that. Jerry, appreciate it.
All the Western Conference teams play at the same time, 8:00.
Yeah, that is cool. I like that. Is that 8 p.m. Central? Is that
yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. I like that they do it that way. They've been doing that for a little while now, so that nobody can kind of scoreboard watch. Although the Loons wouldn't have any incentive to really scoreboard watch much anyway. They got to win no matter what. But they've everything will be resolved by about 10 p.m. Saturday, and we'll know a whole lot more then. Jerry, appreciate it. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Good stuff from Jerry, and just kind of talking about Adrian Heath made me remember some of his best podcast appearances over the last couple of years. He was always a great and gracious guest. I don't think whoever they hire as head coach will be anywhere near as good in that realm. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I wanted to end that kind of thought on Minnesota United by playing a clip from Adrian Heath appearing on this show in November of 2021. One of, I think, 3 or 4 times he was on the show. Always fun. This was him kind of talking about critics, fans. They ended up making the playoffs that season, kind of by the skin of their teeth. It's kind of been their MO. But here he was. Here's an exchange we had that was one of my favorite moments on this show.
I don't do any social media because I know what it's like, and I don't want to be listening and reading what people think about me who don't even know me and have never met me and are suddenly an expert on my particular industry, because it's one of the few industries that everybody seems to know my job better than me. And yet I have enough respect for everybody else's position not to think I know more than them. But that's the world we live in.
I think you should join Twitter, Adrian, and then before every game, put out a Twitter poll asking what formation you should use and what your starting 11 should be.
Yeah, well, everybody, hindsight United's never lost. And everybody I speak to says, in hindsight, I go, yeah, but I haven't got hindsight. I have to pick the team 2 or 3 days before and work on the team shape. And, people have always got a really good opinion of what we should have done after the event. Unfortunately for me, I don't get that opportunity.
Did you say hindsight United? I've never heard that before. I love that. That's great.
Hindsight United, never been beat.
And again, not saying it wasn't time for Heath to move on, but I am saying I will miss some aspects of him, particularly how good he was talking and how good he was talking on this podcast. Let us finish with a couple things in the cooler today. Number 1, Marcus Davenport's injury for the Vikings. We saw the impact he had in his absence at the beginning of the year when he was missing with an ankle injury, and the Vikings just had a hard time generating much pass rush at the beginning of the season. He came back, had a big impact in that Carolina game, their first win of the year. He's been playing, kind of hobbled, but playing each of those last few weeks, had a pretty big impact early on in that Bears win as well, but now he is out. He went out in that Bears game. He has a high ankle sprain on injured reserve for us, so missing at least 4 weeks. That is going to be a blow for the Vikings. Danielle Hunter has been really good this season and has been helped by some of what Davenport has been able to do, taking a little bit of the heat off of him. Defense is having to account for a second talented pass rusher. I don't think they have someone else of Davenport's caliber to pair with Danielle Hunter, so got to watch for that in these 4 games that he's going to miss at least. Can Danielle Hunter, keep being explosive? He's got 8 sacks already this season in 6 games, having a tremendous year, really being kind of the player we thought he was in Brian Flores' system. But can the likes of, guys like DJ Wanham, can they step up and do more in the absence of Marcus Davenport? Do they have enough depth and talent along that defensive line to account for that injury? I don't know if they do, but I will be watching for that as they play San Francisco on Monday and beyond. One other thing, New York Times had an interesting piece today on kind of the future of sports on TV, what a lot of NBA teams are doing. They kind of took a good look at Phoenix and their model, where Bally Sports Arizona basically just went off the air on Friday. They've got no more Diamondbacks games, of course. They've got no Suns games. Nothing else out there. No Coyotes games. So they're, the Suns have gone to a model where they're showing games over the air and on, the direct-to-consumer streaming. And that could be the model going forward. That could be the upshot for a lot of you, that a lot of sports programming could eventually, not tomorrow, not even maybe in 3 months, but, in the next 2 to 3 years, could return to a degree to over-the-air programming. So not requiring a cable subscription, something that would be on, like I said, over-the-air TV. And that could be, as teams realize that the revenue might be there, they're going to invest in relationships with fans, making sure they have a robust fan base. That's what the Suns are doing right now. That is their entire goal with this strategy. So I don't know if every team can make that happen viably financially. I don't think every team's model is the same. But the prediction from a lot of smarter people than me is that this is kind of part of the future of sports on TV, and that as we kind of see these deals expire in the NBA, in MLB, and other sports, that some of this is going to kind of come back. They've kind of labeled it Back to the Future, where a lot of these games are going to be over the air, and they're going to kind of work on relationship building with fans over all-encompassing profits. I will believe it when I see it, because these teams need money. They need money to fuel salaries for players, things like that. I don't know what players are going to think if the pool is shrinking, especially in Major League Baseball this offseason, where we're already hearing rumblings of diminished payrolls for the Twins and other teams. But if it works out to be a more fan-friendly model, I and you will probably be all for it, and we'll see where it takes sports from here. That will do it for me today. Lots of good stuff coming up tomorrow. Conversation with Chip Scoggins on Gopher football, Vikings, all sorts of good stuff. So stick around for that on Friday. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.